Hey, everybody, Heidi Harris here. Glad you're with me today. I am excited to talk to my guest. His name is Peter Kasl. He wrote a book called Escaping the Grip of Eastern European Communism. And I cannot tell you how important this book is and timely it is for what's going on in the world now. So, Peter Kasl, welcome. Glad to have you. I understand you've been following me for years, and I think that's great. I appreciate your taste. But I love the fact that you sent me your book and made me aware of it. It's called Escaping the Grip of Eastern European Communism. As I mentioned, this is a big deal, especially now when we have so many moronic college kids in America running around talking about socialism and communism as if these are great things because, of course, they've never lived under that system. So they don't understand it, and you have, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss the book and the reason why I wrote it and the important information I have in there about communism, what it is, what it's not, socialism, Nazism, the difference.
Yeah,
Many people have no idea
yeah.
about
I
that.
don't think they do. I don't think they do. Yeah, you grew up obviously in Czechoslovakia before it
That's right.
became the Czech Republic. And when you were a little kid, did you realize that you were under some kind of a system that was repressive, or did you even understand that as a kid?
Well, just a little historical background. I was about 11 years old when we defected communism. And even back then, I already had a pretty good sense of what communism is. Why? Because my parents were diehard anti-communists. They were not part of the party. So I was pretty much raised to be an anti-communist, even by my grandparents. So it was something that was embedded into me even at a young age. So I do remember when we went to school, for example. When I came home, I had to almost be re-educated by my grandparents and parents to say whatever you heard, that's not what happened. That's not
Well,
reality.
kind of
So
like
I have to
today in
almost
America. When you're talking about your parents and your grandparents, did your grandparents live in a time when it was more free?
Well, yes and no to somewhat. They went through World War II, so talking about we got fascism over there, so that was a problem. But when they were in their 20s, yes, there was democracy, I guess you can call it,
Okay.
before Hitler just came in and just took over. But after that, it was communism, and of course, after 1968, when the Soviet Union tanks just rolled in, that was communism on steroids, basically from
Okay, so
1968.
the reason I was asking is because when you're talking about your grandparents, and your parents having a different attitude, they had to have had a frame of reference about what it's like to be free, and that's what I was curious about. And interestingly, you talk a lot in the book about the opportunities, things that couldn't happen for your father, things that couldn't happen for your family because he didn't join the party. Talk about that.
That's right. In communism, you basically had to join a communist party in order to have so-called privileges, being able to go to university, have a better job, have opportunities. And if you did not, you were basically you were encouraged to participate, be willing to participate, or else you would not get the opportunity. So there was a constant pressure for my parents to join a party. They refused. My mother could not. My father could not. Why? Because my grandparents were farmers, and everything was confiscated by communism during my when my grandparents had farming, horses, cattle. They that was confiscated in the 50s. So we just could not. My parents could not join a party. It was just
I don't
not
yeah.
going to be an option.
I
And
don't blame him. I don't blame him. And your dad was actually hiding the fact that he was working on cars. Talk a little bit about that, kind of a second job for him, but he had to hide it so people wouldn't know he was doing it.
yeah, in communism, you were not allowed to have a business. I know it may seem silly in the United States, but you were not allowed to have extra income. So he was a mechanic, and in his garage, he would fix cars for others, and it was almost like a Mad Max barter town where sometimes they didn't even exchange with money. It was somebody would bring their car, he would repair it, and they would give us eggs. or some kind of food, some kind of. So it was almost a barter because it's one thing to even exchange money. That was a big no-no. But there was some kind of bartering. So and there was a constant complaints by neighbors that there's a lot of noise banging on metal, and so my father was constantly reported to the local authorities, but luckily they knew some people there who just kind of subdued that. It's like, hey, listen, I got another complaint last week that you made some noise. So he had to be very discreet, not not be obvious. There's one thing in communism, it turns everybody into snitches, and
Yes,
they
and you
get
mentioned
rewarded.
that was my next question, and that's in the book. You talk about that, how it turns everybody into snitches. Explain that.
Well, communism is not just not having goods and services. It turns everyone basically into snitches, envious, everything that Bible talks about, to not to be jealous, envious. They basically just turn the things around. So anybody that noticed that you had a maybe better car, they would report you because everyone had the same amount of income, whether it's a doctor or a janitor. So if you had a better car, then they were thinking, well, how did you afford that? If I have 1,000 Czech crown currency and you have the same amount, how can you afford it? So people will be reported. So you have to hide your new television. You have to, basically extort almost somebody. If your neighbor did not like what kind of car you had, then you may have to explain yourself. It's just simple stuff like that people take for granted, but this is something that you had to live with. And you have to be constant surveillance. You're always being watched.
You know
Right?
what's interesting? We got a taste of that during COVID, didn't we?
That's
When
right.
I
That's
remember
right.
going into a pet store one day, and there's little
Yeah.
brat who was about 18 or 19 years old coming up to me, giving me a hard time for not wearing a mask. And I thought, you would have been perfect for the Nazi youth, you little brat.
Oh, absolutely.
Same mentality, Peter. It's
That's
same
right.
mentality.
That's right. I remember during the COVID, we went to a concert in 2021, and I see that this young 18-year-old asking me if I have that COVID card. And I'm like, are you a medical person who can
Wow.
evaluate? Have you heard of OSHA? OSHA is basically you cannot
Mm.
reveal. I don't have to reveal to you, vice versa, what kind of shots I've had. It's like, and he's looking at me like with a deer in the headlight look, like he never even have been asked because I work in the healthcare. So I asked him that question, and he was like, "Yeah, you don't. Yeah, what authority do you have to ask me whether I got a flu shot, COVID shot? Who are you?" And
Right.
obviously, that's not something that we could even imagine questioning in communism. You have to have all your papers at all time, and there's that funny line, old movies like your papers are out of order, and that's basically what every adult had to carry, your papers.
Wow.
Anybody, any of the parents, you could have been stopped anywhere on the street, you're going grocery shopping, and you would have to have your papers, and that's how it felt like during
Oh,
COVID.
absolutely. I got a piece of paper. All of us in broadcasting did. I have a piece of paper in my possession. I've got to dig it up where it says that I have the right to travel because I was in broadcasting and I guess it was 2020. And I thought,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, we're talking communism here. You're going to
That's
give
right.
me a piece of paper is going to give me the right to drive across town at 4 or 5 in the morning to do my show. And I have to show this possibly to a police officer. I couldn't believe that. And it goes back to how you were raised.
It was scary. It was scary. You could not just travel in the country, just take a weekend trip and go 3-4 hours. You would be stopped by police and asking you, where are you going? Why are you going to the other side of the country? You had to explain yourself. And it's something that other communist countries have. Like, for example, in Cuba, they have the same thing. That's why I sympathize with Cubans, because they live in the same communist regime that we
Mm,
experience in Eastern Europe. So I
yeah.
really feel for them.
Talk about how they were kind of camping while plotting to get out of the country.
Well, in communism, you were not allowed to leave the country. Uh, if you bribe somebody, you could go to East Germany, which was communist, Poland, Hungary. other communist countries. But you still have to go through leaps and bounds and bribe a doctor to give you a note that, So when we decided to go to Yugoslavia, which was a communist country, but they were communist slash socialist, we had to bribe a doctor to give my mom a note that she needs to swim in the Adriatic Sea. By the way, we never been in the ocean before that, and just bribe people to actually get the visa to go to another Eastern European communist country. So we did that, and it was three different families. It was all coordinated about 2 years in advance, discussions in the basements. We were all discussing the plan, how we're going to execute it, how we're going to leave. Every family applied for visa at different times, so it didn't look suspicious. Back then, they didn't have computers, so one family applied this, and that, and everyone left for Yugoslavia, which is now Croatia. Everybody left at a different time. Ironically, we were the last of the three, and we left on July 4th, 1983. We didn't even realize what July 4th meant.
Right. Of
It's
course.
truly our independence. That's when we left, and we didn't even realize it until we came to the United States, and we know what July 4th means. But we left on July 4th, and we drove through Hungary, another communist country. We camped there a little bit, and we met there, camped for about 2 or 3 days with the other families to coordinate our next plan.
Now, you kids didn't even know about this at the time. Just the adults knew, correct?
That's right. It was too risky for my parents to reveal anything to an 11-year-old or my brother, 12-year-old, because God forbid we said something by
Right.
accident. It would my parents would get 20 years, 25 years in prison, hard
Wow.
labor. We would become orphans. So my parents could not risk even telling them. Now we knew we were going to Yugoslavia, to the ocean, which we were excited. We'd never seen the ocean, and so that was it. But my parents obviously knew the details. Even my grandparents were not uh, told the truth, because my grandma, for example, she would accidentally slip a tongue by saying, "Oh yeah, they're also going to go to Austria, which is Western Europe," and my parents would have been arrested like matter of days.
Hmm.
So it was definitely under secrecy.
Yeah. And we don't, even during COVID, we didn't have a lot of that here, but even in places that you consider free, like Australia, there were people who were not allowed to go visit family in other
Oh,
states in Australia during the COVID lockdowns. And people forget how tenuous our freedom is and how easily it can be taken away from us, because not only because of evil elected officials, but because of the other citizens who are com- complicit. They go along with this nonsense.
totally agree. During this COVID, I had like flashbacks, and my
I'll bet
parents
you did.
who still
Mhm.
flashback. This is like when you're looking at a freeway and you see an accident about to happen. I just know which direction the world is marching, and unfortunately, it's not marching to the right direction. And freedom can be easily lost. You don't even realize it. It doesn't just like show up one day, and it slowly creeps on you. And
Mhm.
as you lose your freedom, you eventually feel like, well, that's how it is, and you eventually become complacent to the status quo, and then you realize I don't even have freedom anymore, and people don't realize it because they never experience it, so they don't know how it looks like. They don't know
Right.
how it's marched towards that. And I just want to say about COVID. COVID was a huge failure on the global scale. It's amazing how the world shut down because of few politicians said you need to shut down. I was just amazed, in awe, and scared to death how the world was able to shut down because of COVID. Now I understand the first 2 weeks, first month, we didn't know what it
Right.
was,
I was
but
just gonna
after
say the
about a
same thing.
year,
2 weeks, we were like, 14 days. Okay, I'll stay home and catch up on my reading. We didn't look at that as potentially longer lasting, did we?
it is just mind-boggling how people are like sheep, and because they never experience something like that. This is exactly how communism work. basically you were told to do A, B, and C, and if you didn't follow, you went to prison. That's what happened. You mentioned like in Minnesota where there were, I would call them KGB walking along the roads, telling people get off your porch, get up, go get up. Like, what is this? This is the United States.
Right. Well, look at the people who were harassed on the beach for trying to walk on a beach in California. I mean,
That's right.
I- it's I couldn't believe how quickly things changed. And once again, if they didn't have all of us, or too many people, I would say, not us, not you and me, but a lot of people who were going along with this, they never could have pulled this crap off. They never could have done.
Oh, absolutely. And that's you made an interesting point. Same thing in communism. If people did not follow it like sheep, the
Hmm.
communism would not have lasted this long. A lot of
Right.
people were bribed into joining the Communist Party because they promised your kids will go to college. You will do that. They will do that. So a lot of half of the people didn't even believe in the communism, but they joined to be part of the culture, so to speak. But my
Right.
my parents and grandparents, we were basically a big opposition. So we were the evil ones in the system. We went to Yugoslavia. We were at the beach for about a week. Then we drove to Austria. We crossed the border illegally to
Went
Austria.
over the Alps like the Von Traps. Were you
That's
singing
right.
on the top of?
That's right.
I mean, that's crazy. Here you are, 11. Your brother's 12, and you guys are literally climbing the Alps with your
It
parents
was
for
it
freedom.
was just a deep forest. We didn't have any maps because if you were caught with a map, that means you were trying to
Oh my
escape.
gosh. Yeah.
So we didn't have any maps. So we followed the sun, east, west, north, and we finally. And when we got on top of the hill, the view of the front page is what I saw, looking down into Austria. The
Okay.
the Austrian vineyards were all the way down up to the border where it says Österreich.
Okay.
Österreich means Austria. And this is the view I was looking at. I was in awe. It was such a reflection of freedom versus the chaos, which was the jungle behind us. And my parents were crying, emotional. They hugged, they kissed, and we walked down that hill. And as soon as we got on the road, the border patrol picked us up. We felt safe by Australia because there was an international law. They could not return us because that would have been a death sentence to my
Mm.
parents.
Well,
So
thank
they
God for that. What did you have with you as you were climbing this? I know you talk about it in the book, but what possessions, if any, were you able to
just
haul up the mountain?
backpack, some luggages, basically clothes, just the basic
Hmm.
clothes. That was very suspicious when you have people walking into wineries with suitcases, and that you don't see that every day on the Austrian border,
That's
but
a dead giveaway. Yeah.
But
Okay.
that looks suspicious. But anyway, they put us through a process. The police station, they put us in this little prison, almost like cowboy days, where they had where the sheriff had their own little cell.
Yeah.
Where you
Hmm.
can it was something like that.
Wow.
The next day, the other two families, they went different direction. They were all caught as well. We ended up in the same hotel. They housed us in the same hotel, and then after that, they processed everything, and then we had to figure out how to get to West Germany. Why? Because we didn't want to stay in Austria, because Austria was never the strongest economy in Europe. And if you're going to sacrifice by leaving everything behind, you might as well go to the best economy in Europe, which was West Germany at the time. So we then had to go figure out how to get illegally to West Germany. So the book did explains how we went. We had some friends who picked us up, and then we ended up on the other side through Salzburg, where Mozart was born, by the way.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's on the border of Austria and Germany. We climbed. We pretended to be hikers, and we blended in. I mean, I look German, right? So we blended in. We walked this huge mountain, and then we climbed down into West Germany. And those two Czech German friends, they took care of us for about a week, and then we went to an immigration office, and you simply walk in the immigration and said, "I'm here to seek asylum. We want to go to the United States, and Germany will be our backup." Because you always have to pick a secondary just in case the primary country did not accept you, which was very common because during the Reagan years, Reagan was very tough on communists, rightfully so. So there was never a guarantee that whatever country you picked, you were going to be allowed to become a
Wait,
legal
wait,
immigrant.
let me stop you there because your father, as you mentioned, never joined the Communist Party. Had he joined the Communist Party, they would have been able to find that out, right? And he would have been prevented from coming into the United States, I would imagine.
No, we were already in West Germany,
But
so
I mean,
so
going back in your history, right? Had they found, because I've heard of people who couldn't get into America in the past who had joined a
that's
certain
right.
party or
That's
whatever,
right.
right?
That,
Yeah.
that that's correct. Thank God my father and never joined, because I know during the Reagan years, if you were part of a communist party, you were not going to show up in the
Right.
United States. You were not.
Right.
And there were three families. One of them wanted to go Canada, stayed in Germany. The other one wanted to do the United States, but he was in the Communist Party
Uh,
reluctantly. So he
okay.
was rejected. So we were the only ones allowed to go to the United States
Right. See,
as
that's
a
what I
free
thought. I
family.
remember that from the book.
That's
I thought
right.
that was the reason one of the people. See, I read the book.
Uh,
I don't talk to anybody if I don't read their book. Why would I do that?
Very good. Thank you so much. Yeah,
Very
you're
good
definitely right about
information.
that.
Very good
So
information.
so back to your question about Germany. It was tough. Germans, you know, I don't have any much love for Germans. I think things have changed, but they were always really they call us Ausländers, which was basically
Mm,
foreigners. And one thing about Germans back then, they were equal opportunity haters. They hated everybody, whether you were a neighbor in Czechoslovakia or anybody else. And I remember we always said to ourselves, the reason why Eastern Europe has communism is because you guys started World War II. If there was not World War II, then the world that we wouldn't have communism. So the irony is they created this communism. This is the reason why, because if there was no World War II, we would not have communism. But people were just cruel, mean. In at that time, if you were marked as an Auslander, which is basically an immigrant, a foreigner, you're always going to be marked
yeah.
as, even if you spoke the language perfectly, you were still considered an immigrant. That's one
Yeah.
thing that the United States doesn't have. We're a melting pot. When we came to this country, nobody cared. Nobody cared where you were from,
Yeah.
if you had an accident or not. They didn't care. You just start working, your butt off, and the rest is history.
Yeah, we're
And
going to
that's
get to that.
really,
But I want to say something else about what you mentioned, because we Americans always get accused of racism and hating other people and this and that and the other.
uh,
Everywhere in the world, there's otherism. You know, if you go to Japan, my sister in law is Japanese and she's not a racist in any way. But that country, if you're a white guy, you're gaijin. You're never going to be successful in business. It's never, I mean, there's just that's the way the whole world is. And to your point, I have a friend who's a Hungarian and he's a gypsy. Now I don't know what I mean. I know the gypsy culture a little bit about it, but I wouldn't know him by looking at him. But he said there's so much racism in Hungary against people who are gypsies
oh,
because they can tell when they talk, they look at him, they go, and he's a very good looking guy. But they say to him, they look at him, they go, "Oh, you're a gypsy," blah 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 blah. He said, "I come to America. First place he lives is Palm Springs, and people are like, "Oh, cool, you're from Hungary." I mean, nobody cared. We're so different. We're not perfect, but we're so different than the rest of the world in so many ways that we need to get credit for.
oh, absolutely. A lot of young people, they romanticize communism as being not racist. Quite the opposite. In communism, gypsies were basically second class citizens. They couldn't
Hmm.
have regular jobs. They were basically discriminated openly. I mean, never mind different races, but I mean, gender, women, a woman couldn't get her like a regular high paying job. It's, I mean, the discrimination was so obvious and so prevalent that people, again, you got these young kids that just think that communism is equal to everybody. Quite the opposite. There was racism, there was sexism, you name it. I mean, every schism, uh, communism had it on steroids.
Hmm. You know, it's
It's the
interesting too.
Bernie Sanders, which I can't stand. I heard that during the '80s he went to Moscow on his honeymoon.
Wow.
Okay, Who goes to a Soviet Union in the 70s and 80s on a honeymoon? What, Hawaii was not available? I mean, so he
Right.
was flying over our heads, my parents, while we were suffering, and he went to Moscow during the 80s, early 80s, in the Cold War era. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And whenever I see him, he reminds me of every communist politician promises the world that it's going to be a better place. Communism didn't come in and say, we're going to provide you misery in life. No, they promise the same thing that he does and others. We're going to make your life easier, better, equal. There's all
Right.
this equal crap. The
Yeah.
more there was no there were groups, there were people who were in communist party had more people, and
That's
most did
right.
not. It was
That's right.
10% had everything, 90% lived like peasants.
Everybody wants equality, but the reality is they want superiority. They want you to
That's
have this,
right.
they're going to
That's
have
right.
this, and they don't care. And the politicians, the elites, whatever group you want to call them, whatever the name they go by, they're always going to have more than the rest of us do. I mean, they're talking about that now with AI. I don't want to veer off onto that, but that's pretty interesting too. So let's talk a little bit about once you got to America, and I'll leave a lot of this. People could read the book, all the stuff that happened with you guys after you got to America. But I was fascinated by when you went back to Hungary, when you went back to Czechoslovakia years later, now the Czech Republic. You were working as a sports. Kind of a
Agent,
coach and an agent for sports. You were kind of a scout, I guess is the best word to put it,
scout.
right? You were a
That's right.
scout. Okay.
That's right.
So you were working as a sports scout. You go back, and the the difference in your mentality versus the people you grew up with. Talk about that stark difference, because even though they suddenly had freedom, they were still in their mind in prison.
That's
Talk a little
right.
bit about that.
That's right. Well, after the Berlin Wall fell in 1990, obviously everything fell apart. So we were allowed to travel back to our old country, 1991. Between 1992, 93 to 98, I was a scout. Obviously, I speak Czech, and I'm a huge hockey fan, and we know Czech, Slovakian, Russians are pretty good hockey players, right? So I work with an agency out of New York City, scouting for young talent, and I would spend a lot of time going to every town imaginable, scouting for young talent, 16, 17 year olds, um, encouraging them to sign a contract with us as agency. But again, I spoke the language, but I didn't understand any of them because they were such a in prison of communism. It took about 20 years after the Berlin Wall for them to figure it out what freedom is. It's not something that just you can just snap out of it. It's in their brain, and even to this day, anybody who's over 40 years old still has that prison mentality of not understanding of what freedom is. They again, they don't know what freedom is. Brings a lot of responsibility,
That's
and a
right.
lot of people in today's society over there actually wish that communism was back because it gave them false security.
Right,
They
because
they had
it's easier
they
to
had very
blame.
little, but they had something.
Right. And you talk about that in the book, and how these older citizens express nostalgia for the communist era.
That's right.
For that reason, because yeah, freedom requires responsibility, and it's easier to live in a bad system. And even if you're whispering, complain about it and blame what's happening in your life on that
That's
system,
right.
than have to blame it on yourself because you don't do what's necessary to have a successful life.
That's exactly right. People had nothing, but they had a certain level of low expectations. When the world is not open, then you're not missing anything. You're not missing a color TV, which we didn't have.
Right.
If you didn't know that existed, you didn't miss anything that because you didn't have access to television outside communism. We only had three channels. It was basically 24, no, not even 24 hours a day. It was about 8 hours of TV, of nothing but propaganda. Everything is great. Communism is doing
Wow.
100%. And
Wow.
evil America. Reagan was enemy number one. He was the devil. Okay, and that's all we heard. Now, luckily, I mentioned it in the book. We lived about 25 kilometers from the West German border, So my father would build this huge antenna where we would get West German channels. So we would be watching
Oh,
Dallas, Dynasty, all those, and we learned a pretty good amount of German to understand. And we were watching these beautiful commercials of products, and we were in awe, even though we had black and white television. It was just amazing how the other side lived, and so that really helped us make the case why we need to get out of here. You know.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was fascinated by what you were saying about the people who are still there who just, don't want to live in freedom. And there are people in this country who don't want to live in freedom. If they get off welfare or
No.
something like that, they have no idea how to actually make a life for themselves. They just have never done it. And
Yeah.
anytime people suddenly get freedom, there's some kind of regime change or whatever, it takes a long time for people to adapt. If anything happens in Iran, I don't want to veer off on that, but if anything happens in Iran and suddenly they have freedom, well, people have been living under this lack of freedom for almost 50 years. So they're
Yeah.
not going to adapt easily to suddenly letting women walk down the street with a dress on or work or whatever else. It's not going to happen overnight.
Very, very good point. You mentioned Iran. My neighbor in Czechoslovakia, he worked at for a communist company, and he was sent to Iran 1977 to 79. 79 is when they had the revolution, and it basically changed from people wearing normal clothes, Persians, capitalism, not well, that it was not capitalism, it was democracy, to what they had since. And he noticed the contrast. It was just unbelievable. And I think, since you may mention Iran, I think because it's only 47 years, relatively short, there's still a generation that remembers how things were. So I think they
Yes.
have the best chance. Now, just imagine the Soviet Union. That's why there was so much corruption in Russia, because they never experienced capitalism. Remember, they went from Tsar to Lenin to
Right.
communism. So
Right.
they never had capitalism. That's why Russia, Soviet Union, and Ukraine, all those countries, they were corrupted. Well, they still are corrupted to the teeth because they never understood what freedom is. Freedom is not sitting around, not doing anything. It actually brings a lot of responsibility, and they didn't know how to apply it to be successful. But I have a lot more faith in Iran. Whatever happens there, I would love to see Iran uh, be like when you see videos and movies from the 70s, dressed up. That country has so much potential.
Yes.
It is unbelievable.
Well, you know what I'd love to see you doing, and if you're already doing this, you forgive me for mentioning it, but I think I'd love to see you speaking at high schools. I'd love to see you speaking at colleges because people need to understand. The kids today are not being taught by their parents what communism is because they've never lived in it. You don't ever hear a person who escaped communism from Cuba or wherever talking about how great things were. You never see it. It's only the people who've
No.
never lived in it.
And it's really unfortunate. I remember when I was in junior high school in the United States in the 84, 85, 1985. I remember in a history class, and this professor was talking about communism. The way he glazed over it, if I didn't know any better, I was like, well, that sounds pretty good to me, the way he explained it. Now I'm like
Right.
looking around. Of course, nobody knows anything. I'm like, that's it? That's all you got to say? I almost felt like I wanted to take him after class, like a teacher would take you after class
Right.
to reprimand him. I was like, are you kidding me? Is this all you got to say? Because so even in 80s, they were already the professors were already semi-socialist communists. It was just unbelievable, and I cannot even imagine being in school now. Now it's universities are basically what you go in normally, and you come out Bernie Sanders on as a
Right.
socialist. It's
Right.
just really sad. I would love to do speeches about that because people have this cute idea that it is a better way. No, it destroys people morality, destroys individualism, it destroys your perspective on life. You become a jealous, envious person that has no ambitions. You're not supposed to be dreaming about something over there. You're supposed to
Right.
work and do this and this and this, whatever the government allows you. That's your job. It's just I would love to do presentations about that. I think I should be teaching universities about communism, because obviously people have no idea what it is.
Well, I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work my contacts for you.
Oh,
Okay,
that would be wonderful.
yeah, I'm making notes right now. One other thing, talk to me a little bit about religion under the communist rule, if there was any at all, and the persecution. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, communism basically is a form of religion.
Yeah, that's your
Communists
God. Government's your God,
want you
right?
to believe in communism.
Right.
That's why communism was in every aspect of your life. With the morning you woke up, communism. Uh, Stores empty because of communism. Schools because of communism. Everything. People talk about how politics gets into your life. Here, you can turn on the TV you mentioned or turn it off. You don't have to be, full, integrated into politics. But over there, it's in you. You have to be living and breathing it. So it's. I'm sorry. What was your question? I'm sorry. I
No, I
totally.
was just going to say how, because you're right
Yes,
about that. And
religion. Religion.
as you're talking, I'm thinking about what happened once again, COVID. Let's go back to, don't go to church. Trust us. We're your
That's
God.
right.
We're going to tell you to take shots. You don't need church. You need to sit home and watch CNN and never leave your house.
Yeah.
And they're always trying to replace God with government.
Absolutely.
It's happening every
Religion.
day here in America.
That's right. Religion was almost outlawed. It was not as bad in Soviet Union, where there was basically, it was against the law to go. But in Eastern Europe, you were allowed to go, but only grandparents typically went. You were strongly discouraged to go to pray. And if you did, I remember there was one of our friends, 11-year-old. He was an altar boy, and that kid was mocked by adults, by
Mm,
kids. They would, I mean, it was just unbelievable, and we couldn't understand it because we came from a religious background. But it was basically strongly discouraged
yeah.
to have any kind of religious. That's why a lot of Eastern Europeans coming into the United States, and uh, they are conservative, but they're not religious, because communism did a very good job to cleanse us of a religion. Now, I am a Catholic. I am my wife, who's Slovakian, by the way. So I'm Czech, she's Slovakian, ironically. We go to church on a regular basis, but in communism, strongly discouraged.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
interesting. The more you talk about it, the more I think about COVID and all the ways they try to
that's right.
institute communism basically into our life with COVID. All this attitude of you're going to stay home. And I had so many people that I knew who could stay home, who could work from home, telling everyone else to stay home. Never mind the restaurant workers and the people who had to go out. Actually, but you're telling them, it's not all equal. You have what you want. You're getting your paycheck. You're typing your little columns in for CNN or whatever, but everybody else should stay home. It's the same exact
That's
thinking.
right.
And the more you talk,
Exactly.
the more I'm realizing that in a way I hadn't thought
Communism.
of it before.
That's right. COVID was a test run. Unfortunately, I
Yes.
think it was a test run on this planet to see how we can shut it down by just, I always I love history. I cannot imagine if Hitler had this technology or this ability to announce, everybody, if you stay indoors, I'm going to be spraying the night sky. If you
Hmm.
if you go outside, you will die. That would have been probably more effective than bombing the cities. I
Right.
always find that quite interesting. But
Yeah.
anyway,
And it brings out human nature. This book and all the things
oh,
you talk about, human nature doesn't change. I don't care if there's money, there's not money, freedom, not freedom. Human nature is what it is. And communism brings out the worst in human nature. I'm currently reading a book about Chairman Mao and the Great
oh,
Famine and all that
wow,
kind of stuff. And it's
yes,
just it's a great book. And it's but it's just horrific. But human nature is what human nature is. There are bribes, there are people who are evil, there are people who are going to try to be good throughout this. They're the same things that go on in any situation. And obviously, this was government caused, this famine and this horrific situation in China, which still continues to a large degree. They don't have freedom. They can't watch whatever they want to watch. They can't get on the
no,
internet and see what they want to see. They're not given all the information.
of course, of course. You mentioned Mao. When you look at the last 100 years, the biggest dictators, power hungry, killed the most amount of people. You got
Yeah.
Stalin, you got Mao. They were all communists. They were all Stalin basically murdered millions and millions of Ukrainians by starving them, by stealing their food and sending it to China for weapons. I mean,
Yeah.
so communism doesn't have a very good track record. So anybody who talks about communism being all lovey-dovey, peaceful, kumbaya, we're all happy. Quite the opposite. Okay, and just one clarification: no, Nazism, socialism, communism, they're very similar.
Mhm.
They're very similar. The reason why communism didn't like socialism or Nazism because they were very similar.
Right.
It's one of those things where people don't realize they can't even tell different. Somebody calls you Nazi because fascist. Do you even know what that means?
No, they
Yeah,
don't.
does
They have
anybody
no
even ask
idea.
what do you even know what that means?
Nope,
You know,
they
you
don't.
know, they don't know that fascism technically started in Italy.
Mhm.
Mussolini, and Nazism was basically fascism with the extra. We hate Jews and other. Basically, Nazism added that extra caveat, so to
Right,
speak.
it's
But,
blaming
but
other
there was
people.
but
It's
there
just
was not much a difference. And communism basically was the same idea. They got communists had the prison, the concentration camps. They got that idea from Hitler because obviously Hitler was really good at having concentration camps. That's what communism learned and had all these concentration camps in Siberia.
right.
So it's all the same.
Yeah. And it's all bad, and we gotta remind people about it all the time.
That's
Peter
right.
Kasl, thank you for being here. Thank you for this book. I'm gonna work my sources and get you on the speaking tour because I
Oh,
really
that would
think
be
you need to be
wonderful.
speaking about this. But it's a great book. I highly recommend everybody get it. I'll put all the links in the description and all your social media where people can find you and all that kind of stuff. Thank you, and thank you for being an American.
Thank you. I'm American. I love this country, and I'm very grateful for this country. Everything I have is because my parents sacrificed, and I wrote this book to dedicate it to my parents who are still alive. They're in their late 70s, and I'm very grateful and for the opportunity to share it with you and your
Yeah.
audience.
Well, God bless you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Thanks. And don't forget to check out my newest podcast, Vegas Crime Files, wherever you get podcasts. These are firsthand accounts from the people who were actually there, stories you have never heard. Join us.